So good evening, everyone.
Good
I
evening.
think we are
Good evening,
ready
sir.
now.
Good
Uh,
evening.
yeah.
Good
Good
evening.
evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
So yeah, tonight we'll be starting with. Oh, sorry. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Olayinka Adewale, and so I will be taking you some part of performance management for this diet. And I believe, or let me say, I'm sure. Um, Mr. Tokwe took you through introduction to PM. He talked about the do's and the don'ts of PM and how to tackle questions, maybe how to prepare for PM, and of course the very obvious thing, PM is a very simple course. It's just that it requires lots of logic. I mean, you have to think a lot to get what the question wants you to get. So yeah, without wasting much of our time, without going through introductions again, nobody can join the game. We have to encourage. So yeah, I will just go straight. If someone should confirm when you can see my screen. Um,
I always see your picture.
yeah, I'm coming. Yeah, can anyone confirm you can see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
We can see your screen.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes,
Okay,
we can
Yes,
see
we
it.
can
okay,
see you.
okay.
Can see your screen.
All right. Thank you. So yeah, tonight we would like to start with activity-based question. I mean, my approach to taking PM is, I mean, for Apex is based on the time constraints. We might not be able to cover the whole syllabus, so I always prefer to pick the most frequent question first, the one I can test frequently. So then we go to less, not less relevant, but less tested ones. So if you've gone through your question breakdown or you've just flipped through past questions, you will realize that activity-based costing and variance analysis are the most tested questions when it comes to performance management. So yeah, I'll be starting with activity-based costing, and in the next class, by God's grace, I will take variance analysis. So we know we are done with those two. Then we can pick other topics that as they come. So starting with okay, so if you have any question along the line, please use just raise up your hand instead. So just raise up your hand using the raise hand feature. I don't know how I'll be able to track those on YouTube. But if you are on YouTube, I'll try to connect to my phone. You can drop your comments or your question under the chat box, so I'll be able to answer your question as we move on. Okay. So yeah, starting with activity-based costing. Now the question is, the first thing we should ask ourselves is, what is activity-based costing, or what is costing itself? What is activity? What is activity-based costing? So we say, for those that did ATS, or those that did management accounting in foundation, or those that used BSc, at a point you must have come across absorption costing and marginal costing at a point when before we got to this level. Now, the conventional ways of allocating our costs is either we go through the marginal way or we treat it using the absorption costing. Now, what's the traditional cost allocation method, which ideally we say is absorption costing? What it is saying is that when you incur an overhead as a company, what you have to do is you allocate those costs based on. Sorry,
sir, we cannot see your screen.
Oh, I was going to say that because just hold on a minute. What's going on? Wow. Oh, Pale, you have something to say?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Please, can you give us the cost outline so that we'll be able to follow you once you are lecturing us one after the other, sir? The cost outline, the one you are going to take us, the topic you are going to.
The courses I'm going to take. Okay. I don't have that ready yet. Probably next class.
Linda has a question. Linda raised her hand.
Who?
Linda.
I cannot say her hand raised, but Linda, if you have a question, please go on while I'm trying to sort out this screen. So what exactly is happening? Why is my screen not coming up?
We can see it now, sir.
You can see it now.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, okay. But for those on YouTube, I don't think they can. Because even me, I cannot. But I don't know what's going on. Okay, yeah, I think it's back on our platform. So yeah, I'm sorry for the break. So what I was saying is that, please, can someone on YouTube confirm you can hear me? I think I can hear myself. Okay, good. Sorry. Where did I stop again? Yeah, I was explaining the conventional, traditional costing. But we have to understand that before we even talk about activity-based costing itself. Now, what the conventional costing is saying is that, let's say, for example, this is Apex tutorial. We have, let's say, let me limit the number of groups to 3. We have 3 PM groups. And we decided to start a company. Apex decided to start a company with PM Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3 being like a division under Apex tutorial. Now, at the end of the year, we incurred, let's say, 1 million naira as transportation costs or any other overhead. Now, under the absorption costing, which is also what we call the traditional, what do we call it? The traditional costing method. Now, what it cares everything I cares about is what is your labor hours, or in some cases, what is your machine hours. So What the traditional method is saying is that we allocate that 1 million naira to PM Group 1, Group 2, and Group 3 using their labor hours, which is where the concept of overhead absorption rate comes in. We'll still talk about that later in just giving us a overview of what activity-based costing came to correct. Now, let's say PM Group 1, they add 100 member, Group 2 has 50 members, and Group 3 has just 10 members. But because of the number of people that we had in Group 1, automatically, in all allocation, Group 1 will always take majority of the cost, even in some expenses that Group 1 knows nothing about. Now, let's say Group 1, all their activity is just in a single building. They don't need to travel all around. They barely spend on transportation. For Group 2, that has 50, let's say they go not often, but they go more than Group 1. But Group 3 that has just 10, all their activities are on the road. So that means that ideally, Group 3 will be incurring more of the transport, while Group 1 will incur less. But for the traditional costing, that doesn't matter. As far as Group 1 is incurring more labor hours, please, the person should kindly mute his self. Now, once you are incurring most of the labor hours, you get the cost. Then activity-based costing now said, why are we punishing people that are not even the one that incur the cost? Why are we giving the cost to Group 1? Why not Group 3 that is? Sorry, read that.
Adewale, mute yourself now.
If I have to come and mute you again, I think this is the second time I'm muting this there. If I have to come again, I'll just keep that up. But and oh, the next people out there. All right. So activity-based costing is now saying, why do we have to allocate costs based on labor hours when in the real sense, not all companies or not all divisions are actually not all of our overhead are directly proportional to our labor hours. Let's say this transport, for example. If we are not traveling as a division, if we don't need to travel anywhere, then we should be spending the minimum or on transportation compared to a company, a division that has just 10, but almost every day, all the 10 staffs, they have to be on the road. So that is what activity-based costing is saying. So activity-based costing just says we should allocate the cost based on why we are incurring the cost, not based on labor hours. So that is just a brief overview of what activity-based costing is saying. Then let me just the content. We will talk about what is activity-based costing. Then we'll talk about some terms, then advantages and disadvantages of activity-based costing. Yeah, this is the main deal. This is where I can test the most. Allocation of costs using traditional costing as well as allocation of costs using ABC. So let's just get straight. Now the question is, what is activity-based costing? Now, activity-based costing can be defined as a system of managing costs by controlling activities that drive costs or activities that cause costs to be incurred. You know, like I mentioned before, activity-based costing is saying that we should allocate costs based on the reason why we are incurring these costs. In PM term, if I want to term it, I'll say based on the cost drivers. So we still get to where I will define the terms. Now, so activity-based costing generally is just say we should manage our costs by controlling activities that drive the cost. Now, going back to our transportation and Group 1, 2, 3 example. Now, if we are to control transportation at that level, you know, using the traditional costing, we were incurring based on labor hours. So on a layman term, if I want to control transportation, that means I have to reduce the number of labors that I have. Whereas it's not even the labors that are even problem, especially for Group 1. So, but activity-based costs are saying, instead of you focusing on the labor hours, why not focus on the main reason why you are even spending this transportation, which is probably they are making deliveries or they have to contact a client. Then minimize the way you make your deliveries. You can group your deliveries and make delivery probably once in a while or something like that. Anything to reduce the number of deliveries that you make in order to reduce your transportation costs. So that is what activity-based costing is saying. So it can also be defined as accounting method that identify the activities that a firm perform and then assign indirect costs to cost objects. Now, this cost object, we'll come back to it later. Yeah, they said activity-based costing involves the identification of factors that cause the cost of an organization's major activity. Support overhead attached to product on the basis of this. We should come back to this. I think I've mentioned everything here. Costs are assigned to product on the basis of product consumption. We'll talk about that when we get to the calculation aspects. So what are the terms we use in activity-based costing? Because we'll continue to hear them more and more. Number one, activity itself. You know, even in the name it says activity-based costing. So in the name, what is activity? Activity is just any event that entails costs. Be it your setup, be it your maintenance, be it your transportation, electricity bill, anything that entails costs in an organization, it is an activity. Now, what is a cost object? The cost object is an item for which cost measurement is required. Now, that is saying that, let's say, Apex tutorial, I'll stick to the same example. You know, I didn't even mention what we are producing. Let's say we are producing bicycle or something like that. Yeah, let me just say bicycle. The cost of, now we are trying to allocate the cost. What is the cost of transportation? How do we allocate transportation on this bicycle? Or how do we allocate this on the tire? How do we allocate this overhead? Now, that particular bicycle that we're trying to calculate, what is the cost of producing this is our cost object. So any item that you want to measure the cost of that particular item is what we call the cost object. It can be a product, it can be a division. If I want to see, oh, what is the amount of transportation or maintenance that I have to allocate to division A or division B or C, then that makes your division A the cost object. Then we have cost drivers. Now, cost drivers is the factors that cause change in the cost of an activity. Now, let me say, let's go back to the transportation. Let's say the reason why we are incurring transportation is because we have to make deliveries. We have to make deliveries to customer. So you can automatically say that anytime that the number of delivery increases, automatically our transportation cost increases. And anytime the number of delivery reduces, our transportation cost is expected to reduce. So we can say the number of delivery is a cost driver to transportation, which is an activity. So cost driver is a factor that causes change in the cost of an activity. Then we have two categories of cost driver. We have a resource cost driver and activity cost driver. Now, the example that I used earlier is an example of a resource cost driver. That is, it measures the quantity of resources consumed by an activity. So as a resource cost driver, the number of delivery, you know, is a cost driver to transportation itself. So the number of cost driver is a resource cost driver to transportation. But on the other end, you know, transportation is not all we are doing. We will spend transportation, we will spend setup, we will spend packaging, we will spend on electricity and all. Now, when you are now trying to calculate what part of transportation should we allocate to this product, what part of production expenses should we allocate to this product, what part of maintenance should we allocate to this product. In that case, the activity itself is now a cost driver to the product. So in that case, they said it is used to assign activity costs to cost object. Remember when I was explaining cost of it, I said it is a product or an item for which you are trying to measure costs. So in that case, you collect all the activity and then you start allocating the cost to the product. Then you can say you have an activity cost driver. Then we also have the cost pool. This is a subset of total indirect costs that can be associated within distinct cost driver. It's more or less like activity itself. They use it interchangeably, but they use mostly cost pool instead of calling it activity. So yeah, that is those are the terms that we have in activity-based costing. So there's no questions so far. A minute. Okay, I don't see any answer. Even though you are not going to enter that. Okay. So now let's go to the advantages and disadvantages of activity-based costing. Though you have to read up more on this. I mean, this is all I could get. So the first advantage of activity-based costing is provide an accurate costing of products and services. Now, obviously, compared to using the traditional one, where you just allocate cost based on the number of labor hours, even when you know nothing about the overhead. But activity-based costing makes us allocate costs in an accurate manner. So it provides us with an accurate method of allocating costs. Then for the second one, said overhead allocation is done on logical basis. Yes, we don't allocate transportation or set up expenses based on the number of staff that we have. It's not logical. So we have to allocate it based on the number of setup that we did. So to be logical. Then number three, it enables better pricing policy. Of course, if you can now allocate your cost accurately, then you should be able to price your product accurately. Probably just add a margin or markup to your costs, and then you get your price. And then it utilizes unit costs rather than total costs. And you understand this better when we get to the calculation part. So ABC uses the unit cost. You want to know how much does it cost per delivery that you make? How much does it? Sorry, please give me a minute. Sorry. Okay, sorry, apologies. Someone was at the door. So yeah, where was I? Okay, I said it utilizes cost, unit cost rather than total cost. So ABC is more concerned about how much do you spend per your cost driver. If your cost driver is the number of setup, so we want to know how much does it cost per setup, then we can now use that to allocate. Then it highlights problem areas which requires attention of the management. Of course, if all these ones you'll get to understand them better when we get to the calculation, because a product might appear profitable if you are using the traditional, but when you now allocate it logically, you realize that oh boy, we've been making loss on this particular product, just that we've been transferring the cost to another division or another product, as the case may be. Then the third one, it is very helpful for organization with multiple products. So if you are selling, if you have just one product, you have no reason to adopt activity-based costing, because I don't know what you are trying to allocate. I mean, all your transportation expenses or whatever is on that one product. So what are you trying to allocate? And then number three, it's easy to compute. I mean, if they say so, yep, it is easy to compute. And Of course, these are one of the cheap answers. If they ask you what are the advantages of activity-based costing, it is easy to compute. 1 mark, done and dusted. Anyway, let's just move on. So the disadvantage is it is expensive. Yes, I mean you cannot use a regular, just a conventional accountant to calculate, to adopt activity-based costing, and then you have to keep special record of all the cost drivers separately. So all this makes activity-based costing more what do I call it? More expensive. And then it is not helpful for small organizations, just like I mentioned, for when it comes to multiple products. I mean, if the organization is small, I see no reason why you should adopt activity-based costing. Again, it may not be applied to organizations with limited products. We're still saying the same thing. Then the fourth one, selection of most suitable cost driver may not be useful. Yeah, this I believe is the biggest problem with activity-based. Let me put this on. What is that again? Sunday Bamidele. Sunday Bamidele, kindly. Okay, yeah. Thank you. All right. So now, you know, when you are trying to allocate costs between two divisions, now I am manager for division 1, you are manager for division 2. Now we want to allocate this particular product, I mean, this particular expenses. And we have more than one way that we can allocate it. Now let's say, let me stick to transportation. Now we can use the number of deliveries made to allocate costs. Or we can decide to use the number of miles that we travel to allocate the. Now, if I look at it as the manager of division A, I'll be like, oh, I think I made the least delivery. Manager of division B, which is you made more delivery. To me, I will say, oh, let us use number of delivery as our cost driver. Then when you get to your own office, you'll be like, wait, hold up. So I say, this man wants coming. Calm down. You feel like, oh, if I use number of deliveries, I think I'll be taking more of the expenses. Then you calculate the miles. You feel like, oh, I used so I made the higher number of delivery, but I traveled at a minimum, let's say maximum of let's say 100 miles or so. But division 1 traveled for like let's say 500 miles. You feel like, no, I think we should use the number of miles traveled instead of number of deliveries. And in that case, we always have conflict on which cost driver to use. So it's always very difficult to select which one is the most suitable cost driver when it comes to activity-based costing. And then the last one, ABC does not conform with accounting standards. So if you go through all your IFRS and your IAS and your whatever, I think SAS, any standard, none of them talk about activity-based costing. But you can see absorption costing, some of them. So it does not conform with accounting standards. So you cannot use ABC to make external reporting. Okay. So yeah, now let's go to the main. Which is where we start talking about calculations. Okay. All right. Now, ideally, in an ABC question, now what you'll be expected to do most of the time is to allocate your costs using one, traditional costing, or sometimes they call it absorption costing, or sometimes they call it conventional costing, whatever English that they use. It doesn't matter. They're still doing the same thing. And using two, activity-based costing. Now, sometimes they will just ask you to allocate the cost. Sometimes they will ask you to calculate the profit. In whichever, you're still doing the same thing, just that The second one, we have more, there'll be an additional fees where you have to deduct your cost from your selling price, of course, to get your profit. But anyway, those are by the way. So now let's start with the first one, which is allocating of cost using traditional costing. So like I said here, I said the traditional costing mostly refers to absorption costing. It involves allocating overhead using labor hours or machine hours. Now, sometimes the question will specifically mention that you should allocate your cost using labor hours, or they will say using machine hours. And in a case where the question is silent, you are to use labor hours. Please note that. Now, in the case where the question is silent, you are expected to use labor hours to compute your overhead absorption rate. But if the question wants you to use machine hours, please use machine hours. Okay? So they said here, I said here, the total overhead of the company is divided by the total number of labor hours used or machine hours used, as the case may be, to attain the overhead absorption rate, which is what we call OAR. Then the OAR is then used to allocate costs to various divisions of products. Now, just note that this is what so this is what we are to do in all cases when we are dealing with traditional costing. So what are the steps that we take when we are allocating costs using traditional costing? So the first thing we do is we calculate the total amount of overhead. That is, sum up all the indirect costs incurred. Your indirect costs can be your setup, can be maintenance, can be transportation, can be name anything. It can be indirect production expenses. It can be So the second one, calculate the number of hours used. That is the sum of the total hours. Now, that I intentionally use hours. We still come back to using what products. Now, you note that now I did not use hours. I just said multiply the OAR, which is sorry, that should have been 3, not 4. That should be 3 and not 4. Sorry, because we got it in step 3. So okay, so multiply the OAR in step 3 by the hours used by each division or products to get the allocation for each division. So let's go into the example and see how we treat how we go about those steps. So yeah, Apex Tutorial is a company of 3 PM groups, and the following budgeted information relates to Apex Tutorial for the forthcoming period. So these are our overheads. We have machine services costing us 300,000, transportation costing us 250,000, setup costs costing us 150,000, and then further information shows that the budgeted production for group 1 is 5,000. For group 2, we have 6,000. Group 3, 5,000. The hours per unit and the total hours are also provided. So you are required to calculate the overhead cost per unit and per group using absorption costing. Now I could have said calculate per unit and stop, or I could have said calculate per division or per group, either way, using absorption costing. But I intentionally use the two so we know how to go about them. So now, going through the solution. Step 1, as we have it here. Sorry. Step 1 is to calculate the total amount of overhead. So coming back to our question, we can see that our overhead, these are our overhead, these three. These three are our overhead. So when we sum the three of them, we have 300,000 plus 250 plus 450,000, which will give us 1 million naira as our total overhead. Then we'll go back to step 2, which says calculate the total number of hours used. Now, total hours. Now, coming back here. Now, most of ICANN question will only provide you with just these two information: the budgeted production and the hours per unit or hour per unit, as the case may be. It will not give you this particular session. Now, never make the mistake. Never should you make the mistake of adding up the hours per unit to get your total hours. Remember, my step 2 says sum up the total hours used by each division. Now, these 6, 7.5, and 5 are not the total hours. They are just hour per unit. Now, for us to get total hours, now come down here. For us to get total hours, okay, for this question's sake, because I already provided the total hours, I could have just added 30,000 plus 45,000 plus 25,000 and arrive at my. Oh, the screen is not clear. Why? For those on YouTube, I have no idea why it is not clear. Sorry, please give me a minute. Let me attend to this. Why is it not clear? I'm really confused. I don't know what to do. And I'm going to know. Okay. So at least somebody said it's clear now. All right. Please, if the screen is not clear from your end, if you're on YouTube, you can just increase your is it resolution or what do they call it? Yeah, I think it's your resolution or your video quality. Yeah, you can just do that. Yes. Okay. So yeah, I was explaining how we can get the total hours. So like I mentioned, I've provided the total hours in this question. So I could have picked 30,000 plus 45,000 plus 25,000, which is what I did here to arrive at 100,000 hours. But a typical ICANN question will not give you the total hours. So you really want to calculate your total hours yourself. And how do we do that? Yep, I got you covered. It is here. Now, look at this other segment. This is how, look at the total hours that we have. We have 30,000, 45, and 25. And yes, they are exactly what we have here. Now, how do we get the total hours? Now, you have to multiply your unit produced or budgeted units or whatsoever it is, either it is budget or actual. You have to multiply it by your hours per unit before adding. Now, division group 1, their budgeted production is 5,000, and they said they want to use 6 hours for each product. So that means in total, they will have to use 6 multiplied by 5,000, which is how I arrive at this 30,000. So see, 5 times 6, 30, 6 times 7.5 should give us 45, 5 times 5,000 should give us 25,000. Now it is these three that you are now allowed to add together. So after you've now added that, so taking us back up here, so we have 100 hours, then we have 1 million naira as our overhead. Then step 3 says that we should divide the total overhead by the total number of hours used to get our OAR. So we've gotten our total overhead, we've gotten our total hours, then we can calculate our OAR, which is so which is 1 million naira divided by 100,000 hours. So, and that means that we are spending 10 naira per hour. So we're spending 10 naira per hour on our product. So then we now have to allocate. Now, you know, the question said we should allocate per group, and at the same time, we should allocate per unit. So I would just say, I will just do for the per unit, and then at your leisure time, you can do per group. Well, I'll just mention what you are supposed to do. So it's as easy as anything, actually. Once you get your OER, you are done with activity, with the allocation. Just the OER is the major thing. So if I say you should calculate per unit, it all comes down. Is it still not clear on YouTube? I mean, what's going on? I can see it from here. Please, if you are on YouTube, once again, just increase your video quality, please. Please, just increase your video quality. Thank you. So, as I was saying, if I say calculate the cost per unit, what I'm just asking you to do is that your OER that you got, multiply it by hours per unit. That's just it. But if I'm saying calculate your cost per, your total cost per group or per division or per product, I'm saying multiply it by your total hours. I see that it's almost, not even almost, it's a very clear something. If I say calculate the cost per unit, just multiply OER by cost per unit. It's so simple. If I say calculate your cost per group or per product or per division, it will just be OER multiplied by, now it will be total production. So if I had gone for overhead per group now, the hours that we'll have here will be the total hours, which will be 30,000 here, 45,000 here, and 25,000 here. So then when I multiply, you will get your total overhead. You are expected to get back 1 million. Let's just do a rough calculation. So if I put the total here instead, 30 times 10,000 should give us 300,000. 45,000 times not even 6. Okay, 30,000 times 10 should give us 300,000. Then 45,000 times what again? 10 again here should give us 450,000, and 25 times 10 should also give us 250,000. That's 300 plus 450 plus 250. Yeah, we should arrive back at our 1 million, which is as clear as it can be. So maybe when we are doing proper ICANN question, we'll talk more on that. So let's just move on to which one? Yep. So the then I don't think it is not clear on YouTube. Oh, Jesus. What do we do with YouTube? The claim is blurry. Please, can anyone confirm on YouTube if the video is clear? Please, just want someone to confirm.
during the classes are always blurry. So
Oh,
most times better they increase the quality. Most times it's always blurry. You hardly see what's on the screen.
oh, oh, oh. But now the
I
problem
think
is,
you should put it on slideshow. Maybe it will be clear better.
okay. But
Omolara and Ajayi raised their hand.
okay. Let's just do it this way. Let's see. Alright. Okay, I think I'm here. Yeah, Omolara, please. I don't want to like move on. You can ask your question, or anybody that raised up their hand earlier. This you can ask your question now.
It's quite clear at my own end.
Yeah, Omolara, please.
Yes, sir. I actually wanted you to go back to the stages of the steps in allocating costs, the
Okay.
slide, but I've gotten it along the line.
Okay.
Sir.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, I can hear you, please. I thought somebody was talking.
Okay, so you stop as allocation overhead per unit.
Yep. I think I've gone past that actually. Because I'm moving to the next slide.
Sorry,
not
please, I
discussed
have
that
a
one.
question.
Okay, go on.
Okay, so can you please go back to the previous slide? I want to ask the question from. It's a bit difficult because I wanted to know why this 30,000. Why you change it to 300,000, 450,000, and how we got the 1 million naira?
This.
The overhead.
Yeah, right.
No, the one up. The 1 million. How did we get 1 million naira? I was thinking we're doing 5,000 times 6 to get the total hours, but how we got the overhead, I'm a bit confused.
These figures, this one here.
Yes.
They are directly from the question. See them here: 300, 250, 450.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, any other person with any question?
Sir. Sorry. Good evening,
Okay,
sir.
go ahead.
You were saying something that we'll get our 1 million back. So that aspect, I didn't really get it. That you were saying we should multiply our answer by something. We'll definitely get our 1 million back when we had it together. Please, can you come again, sir?
Okay, let me just recap then. Because I can see some people said on YouTube that they don't get it too, but I am coming. Okay, from current slide. Yeah, so what I'm saying is, look at this. This slideshow will be a little bit of problem because I have to be going back and forth. But how do I say it? We have our total overhead here directly from the question, which is, and when you sum up, you are expected to get 1 million, which is like also from the question. And this total hours too was provided in the question. And I was saying that I can usually will not give you the total hours. What they will give you is these two: units produced and hours per unit, because they are expecting you to fall for the trap of just calculating your 6 plus 7.5 plus 5 as your total hours, then divide 1 million by whatsoever you get. Once you fall for that trap, that question is gone. I mean, there's nothing else that you can do in the question that will be correct. So what you're expected to do when you have something like that, I can has given you units produced or units budgeted, whatever they call it, a fast unit. Then they give you hours per unit. So you are expected to multiply the two together, which is what I did here. 5,000 times 6, you arrive at the 30,000, which is what I gave you in the question. 6,000 times 7.5, 45,000. It's the same thing here. 5,000 times 5 times 5,000, you get it. Now, OAR is as clear as just dividing your total overhead by your total number of hours. You get 10 naira per unit. So what I was now saying here is that in the question, I asked you to calculate overhead per unit, and also I asked you to calculate overhead per group, or per, yeah, I think I used per group. So overhead per unit, just as the name implies, it says calculate the cost per unit. So in that case, I will use hours per unit to get my cost, the overhead per unit. So hours per unit multiplied by OAR, which is the 6 hours per unit for division and for group 1. So 6 times 10, we arrive at 16 naira. It means that they incur 16 naira on overhead per a unit produced in group 1. So for group 2, they incur 75 naira. For group 3, they incur 15 naira. Now, I was not saying that, assuming we decide to go for overhead per group. Now, overhead per group is saying that instead of your hours per unit, just use the total hours instead. I don't want to know how much it costs per unit. I just want to know how much of this total of this 1 million was spent by group 1. How much of this 1 million was spent by group 2? How much of this was spent by group 3? So I don't want to know, I don't care about how much it takes them to provide to produce it per unit. So if you replace the hours per unit by the total hours up here, I mean here or here, anyone that you decide to pick. So if you do 30,000, which will now be here. So of course your OAR remains constant. It remains the same. Either you are doing our cost per unit or cost per group, it doesn't matter. So 30,000 multiplied by 10, you should have 300,000 down here. 45,000 multiplied by 10, you should have 450,000 down here. And then 25,000, I mean, yeah, 25,000 divided by 10, you should have 250,000 down here. So if you now add the 300,000 plus 450,000 plus 250,000, you should arrive back at this 1 million. I don't mind the fact that they match almost exactly as what we had here. I mean, I just had to pick an easy figures so that I don't get to use much of calculator. So 300,000 plus I think it's 450,000 and 250,000. When you add them, you should arrive back at your overhead. So you are saying that from these 300,000, 250,000, 450,000, which make up 1 million, 300,000 of it was incurred by group 1. Group 2 incurred 450,000 and group 3 incurred 250,000. Then you can say you have allocated the cost using absorption costing. I hope that is now clear to everyone.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome. So do you have any other question before I move to activity-based testing?
Hello. Hello, sir. Could you display the question, please?
The question?
Yes.
So I'll still share this slide with the group later, with the class later. Okay. Yeah, I think this is the question. So yeah, we'll cook. I will move on.
Just hold on a minute.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Yeah.
Hello. I hope this class is recorded, sir.
Yeah, it's recorded.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Okay, so yeah, moving to the second segment, which is activity-based costing. Now, allocating using activity-based costing. So we say under traditional, I mean, I gave the stages and I've talked about what activity-based costing is all about. So let's just go straight to what are the stages when it comes to activity-based costing. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that ICANN will do stage 1 and stage 2 for you. I mean, all the questions that you asked, stage 1 and stage 2 has always been done. Of course, it should or it will always be done. Now, the stage 1 is, first, you have to identify all the activities within the organization. And of course, you remember, activities are everything that incur cost. So in that case, you are to identify all the overheads of the company. What are the things we spend money on? That's that. Then number two, you identify what are the cost drivers of this activity. So ideally, I can tell you, okay, these are the overhead and these are the reasons we incur them. So they should tell you overhead and their cost drivers. As clear as that. So that means they've made life a little bit easier. So you move to step 3. So and you have to calculate activity cost driver rates, which is what we call CDR for each activity. And how do we get CDR? Our CDR is equal to your total cost of activity. So let me still use transportation again as the activity and the number of delivery as the cost driver. So if I say we spent 500,000 on transportation this year, then we go again. Oh, we are spending money on transportation simply because we are making deliveries. Now, how many deliveries do we make during the year? Let's say group 1 made 10 deliveries, group 2 made 12 deliveries, group 3 made 15 deliveries. Then we add 10 plus 12 plus 15, that should be around 37. So that means to get our cost driver rate, we divide 500,000, which is the cost of transportation, divided by the total number of cost drivers, which is the total number of deliveries, and that would be 500,000 divided by 37, and then you arrive at a cost driver rate. Now, to allocate costs is more or less like traditional costing. So you just multiply your CDR. You know, under traditional we use OAR instead, but here we use CDR. Then multiply by the activity for each division. I mean the activity driver, the cost driver for each division. Then this step 5 doesn't come all the time, but when it comes, just use preparation of profit statements, which is the normal way we prepare profit statements. Sales minus direct expenses minus indirect. And of course, one thing if you always remember is both activity-based costing and traditional or absorption costing, they only allocate indirect costs. You can never allocate direct costs. It's not possible. Direct cost is direct. Division A will know the amount of direct costs that they incur. You don't allocate direct costs. You cannot buy material for product A and then allocate the cost to product B. It doesn't work that way. So both of them are only used to allocate indirect costs. So when you want to prepare profit statement, they should give you a couple of direct costs, maybe direct material, direct labor, direct expenses, or whatsoever they give you. Then you add it up to the indirect cost, then subtract everything from your sales, and shall have at your profit for the company. So let's see an example, and then we'll stop the class here. Then we can solve proper question and the next class, hopefully before the end of the week, if we are able to fix the class. So yeah, Apex Tutorial is a company. I mean, I'm using the same example, just with a little bit of addition. You can see there are more information now. The expenses remain the same. Machine services, of course. Now I used labor hour as this year. The ones here represent the cost drivers. So usually that's why I can just write here. They will tag this place as usually I can call it cost pools, and here the drivers. Who is that? Who is that? Notes. Thank you. All right, yeah, we're back. So we have the cost pools and their drivers up here. So the cost pools is number 1. We have machine service, we have transportation, we have setup. The cost remains the same: 300,000 to 50,000 and 450,000. And their cost drivers are labor hours, number of deliveries, and setup respectively. So the information here remains the same: budgeted production, hours per unit, total number of deliveries, and setup. So you are required to calculate the overhead cost per unit and per group using ABC. So, yep. Going on to the, like I mentioned, step 1 and step 2 will be done by ICANN. And also in my question, I've also done that. I've told you the various activities as well as their cost drivers. I told you these are the cost pools. So automatically these are the activities. And yeah, these are their cost drivers. So you don't need to worry about step 1 and step 2. It should always be done by ICANN, except if somebody has done something crazy to the examiner and decide to go extra crazy. I will forbid such things. Okay. So calculate step 3 now, which says we should calculate. Step 3 says calculate activity cost driver rates for each activity. So now that's why I'm starting directly from step 3. I ignore step 1 and step 2. So the total cost of activity, CDR is equal to total cost of activity divided by total cost driver. Now machine hours. I did 300. Machine services. I did 300,000 divided by 100,000. Now 100,000 is missing in this question. So in a minute or a minute 2, while I go and get water, so in your notes or probably your jottings, just calculate how I got the 100,000 hours. So we'll be back in a minute. Those are small pieces. Okay. Can anybody confirm they got 100 hours? Or maybe my calculation was wrong.
Okay, is it total labor hours?
Yep. See right here. Yeah, for machine service, labor hours was used as the cost driver, right? And the cost driver formula says it has to be the total cost of activity divided by the total cost driver. So I'm automatically saying total cost of machine services divided by the total labor hours. Now, how did I get the total labor hours from the question? The total labor hours, I got 100,000 hours. Now, how did I get that 100,000 hours from this table? I just need someone to confirm they got 100,000 hours too, so we can just move on.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay. So that means my calculation was right. So for those that did not get the 100 hours, okay? So what you're expected to do is 5,000 multiplied by 6 plus 6,000 multiplied by 7.5 plus 5,000 multiplied by 5. Yeah, you should get the 100,000 hours used here. Now, for those of you that got it, yeah, please keep the figures that you add before you sum them, because you are still going to need them later. When we get here, we still need them. So for machine service, so 300,000 divided by the total cost drivers, which is the total labor hours, you arrive at 3 naira per hour. Now, remember when we were talking about the advantages of ABC, we said it makes use of unit price or something like that. Yeah, it says it utilizes unit cost rather than total cost. See what we're saying? Now look at it here. Activity-based costing will first of all drag you to the lowest. We want to know how much of these expenses did you incur per unit, which is now per hour. So that's the literal definition of it utilizes unit cost. Therefore, transportation, which is the second one, we spent 250,000, which is the total cost of overhead, and then the cost driver is deliveries. So we come down here and calculate, oh, what are the number of deliveries here? Okay, they made 10,000 deliveries here, 8,000 deliveries here, 7,000 deliveries here. So when we add the three, so we should get, I think that should be 15 plus 10, that's 25,000 deliveries. So you divide 250,000 by 25, you should have 10 naira per delivery. And then for the last one, the same concept, 30,000 plus 25,000 plus 45,000 should give us 100,000 setups. So then we divide the total cost of setup, which is 450,000, divided by 100,000 setups. So we should get 4.5 naira per setup. So this is our CDR. Then we can now allocate the costs. Now here, I did it separately. And in fact, for ABC, you know, unlike absorption costing that I could have calculated either per hour or in total, I can decide to choose anyone. But for ABC, it is not possible. Well, not 100% not possible, but it is way easier to calculate the total first, then you come back and calculate per unit. Even if the question wants you to calculate per unit, still calculate the total, then just divide by units produced and get your price. If I want to be calculating per units from here, it will take me a whole longer process. And you know, PM is all about timing. And of course, you are not losing any mark if you do it that way. So, to allocate costs now, coming back to our steps, for allocation, our formula says that's to be CDR multiplied by activity driver for each division. Now, for those that did the total number of hours here, I believe we should have 30,000, and if this is 25,000, that's 55. So I believe this should be 55,000. Yeah, 5,000. So now, remember, we did not allocate based on 6, 7.5, and 5. I mean, we did not calculate our CDR based on 6, 7.5, and 5. So in no circumstance should you allocate based on 6, 7.5, and 5. We divided it by 30,000, 45, and 25. So in that same way, you multiply your 3 naira, which is what we got here, your CDR. You know, the step says CDR multiplied by activity driver. So our CDR is 3 naira. So you multiply, that's why I wrote at 3 naira per hour here. So that's 3 naira. Multiply by the 30,000 that you arrived at here. When you multiply 5,000 times 6. So that is where I got the 90,000. So is it clear? Or
Yes.
does anybody have a question on that?
Sir, please, can you come back again?
But sir, please,
Can you?
that setup cost that you put at 10 naira per setup, you already put 4.5, 450 divided by.
Yeah, there's a mistake there. It's supposed to be 4.5, not 10.
That's a mistake. Okay, thank you for that. So somebody asked me to come again. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Let me
The
check this
allocations.
on-
Sorry,
I'm
please. The
coming,
allocation.
please. Yeah, I'm coming a minute. Let me check this on YouTube. So it's not like I'm abandoning them. Okay. Where do you go from here? Okay, that's right. Sorry, a minute. Oh, I'm not seeing any live chat again. For those on YouTube, I don't know what's wrong. Okay, it's back now. It's back. Okay, I don't think I have any question there. All right. So let me just come again. For the allocation, I believe everybody is clear with the CDR. Now for the allocation is that you have to multiply this your CDR per, here, when we arrive at, before we arrive at this 100,000, we added some things together to get those figures. Now those things that you added together to get this 100,000, you now multiply them separately by this 3 naira. Now instead of, here we had 6, 7.5 and 5, but we did not use the 3. We multiplied them with the units produced to get total hours. Then we added the total hours to get this 100,000 hours. So those figures that you added, which I believe should be 30,000, 45,000, and 25,000 hours for group 1, 3, and 2 and 3 respectively. So now, when you are multiplying again, it is those figures that you added with this to get this 100,000 that you multiply with 3. So when you do 3 times 3 times 30,000, you should have 90,000. 3 times 45, you should have 135, and 3 times 25, you should have 75,000. Now, when you add these 3 together, you are expected to get back 300,000. Once you do not get 300,000, something is wrong somewhere. When you add these 3, you are expected to arrive at 300,000. The moment you don't get 300,000, just know that, oops, is that the question is wrong or I am wrong? So I think this is, 135.75, that's 210 plus 90, we got the 300,000. So the same thing for transportation. I just hope. Okay. For transportation, we have our CDR as 10 naira per delivery, and then we did not do any extra calculation here. We only had 10,000, 8,000, 7,000. So 10,000 times 10 naira, you get 100,000. 8,000 times 10, 80,000. 7,000 times 10, you get 70,000. So once again, when you add these 3, you are expected to get 250,000, which, of course, we should have. And then the last one for setup, we have 4.5 naira per setup, and then we had 30,000, 25,000, and 45,000 for the setups. So if you multiply 30,000 times 4.5, you arrive at 135. If you do 25,000, you should get 112.5, and then for the last one, you should get 202.5. And then the total, when you add the total again too, you are expected to get the total overhead. And if you remember, our total overhead was 1 million, which is the summation of these 3, or you can go back all the way down to where we did absorption costing. You are still expected to get to the same figure. So now that we have allocated, as soon as I said, just calculate the cost per group. I mean, this is our answer. So that means from the 1,325,000 was spent by group 1, 27,500 was spent by group 2, and 347,500 was spent by group 3. But the question went further to ask us to calculate per unit too. So to get per unit for ABC is, if you want to calculate it from start, if you want to calculate it from here, it's a little bit lengthy, and difficult. It's just unnecessarily longer. So just do for the total and then come down here and divide. So I can just divide this by the number of units produced. Then I will arrive at my figures. If I've gone through the other way too, I should get these figures. And that will be it. So just divide your total by your number of units produced, and then you should arrive at your cost. This should be overhead per unit down here. And we have answered the question. Now, if we compare, now let me use this to explain. Now look at the figures that we had when we use traditional. So traditional costing is saying that, oh, we are spending 60 naira per unit on group 1, 75 naira per unit on group 2, and 50 naira per unit on group 3. But in the real sense, we are supposed to spend, in the real sense, we spend 65 naira, 54.58, and 69. Now imagine, see this guy right here, 54.58. For absorption cost is saying that it is spending the highest, 75. And see this guy here, absorption cost is saying it's spending the lowest, which is 50. But in the real sense, it is the highest. So that is why absorption costing is better. So he's saying that let's just ignore the fact that it is, now look at it here, simply because group 2 has the highest number of labor hours used, they allocated more of the cost to it at 75 naira. This guy has lower, just 25,000, so he's getting lesser of the overhead compared to, now when we now allocate it based on, oh, let everybody show what they spent money on. Nobody should rob in anybody. So we can now see that even this guy is now spending up to 55 naira, and this guy that is supposed to be, that we said was incurring 15 naira, is actually incurring approximately, okay, how did you get this set up? Ooh. I'm coming. Okay, 17 now. So this is just saying that ABC helps us to allocate cost logically, and then from here we solve some questions, we solve more questions even beyond what we have here. So I mean, these are icon questions like you can see, but ideally I like to solve at least 3, and the rest you can practice on your own. Okay, so to answer your question, Michael, I don't want to pronounce the other name so that I don't spoil your name. Okay, but Michael on YouTube, how did I get set up? Which part of setup exactly? Are we talking about these figures or this particular one? Or well, let me just explain the two, then you pick your answer. So to arrive at this particular one, the CDR, our CDR is total cost of activity divided by total cost driver. And we spent 450,000 of setup as per the question. And the cost drivers for setup is number of setup. This should be number of setup anyway. And the number of setup that was incurred was 30,000, 25,000, and 45,000. And when you add these 3 together, you will realize that we actually had a total of 100,000 setup. So which is what we have here. So when you divide 450,000 by 100,000, you get 4 naira per setup. So when we are now allocating again, we now multiply this 4.5 by these 3 figures again. 30,000, 25,000, and 45,000. So if you do 4.5 multiplied by 30,000, you should arrive at 135. Multiplied by 4.5 multiplied by 25,000, you should arrive at this, and multiplied by 45,000, you should arrive at this. I believe I'm able to answer your question. So I would like to end the class here, and then in the next class we will go on to the questions.
Hello, sir.
Please,
Hello, sir.
just give me a minute, please. I will open the floor for questions, please. Okay. So I was saying that I will most likely send another slide that contains questions and solutions. Then we'll walk through the solutions and
Hello,
see
sir.
how. Please give me a minute. Let me just round up the class. Then I will open the floor for questions. Or is it that you want to call my attention to something?
Yes, sir. And all these things, the questions that you have solved so far, can they be transferred to the WhatsApp group? And the
Of
voice
course,
message?
I will. The voice message, no, I don't think the voice message. You can just listen to the recordings later, or you can check on YouTube later.
But the
It will be
question can
available.
be transferred to the platform.
Yeah, I will send the slide. Yeah, you can pick the question
Okay, sir.
from the slide. All right. So yeah, I was saying, we'll most likely send another slide against next class. So we will be able to walk through questions, and yeah, we should be done with activity-based question in no time. So the floor is open now for question. So if you have any question, maybe you've probably gone through activity-based costing on your own and you have a question, or I think I can stop sharing now. Or you just have a question on this class, and now it's time. We have answered. Okay. Omolara, let's start with you. Omolara Olashope.
Yes, sir.
Yep,
I didn't raise my hand.
Your hand was raised actually. Okay. So
Oh, so sorry. So sorry. I was a mistake.
Brian,
Yes,
your hand was
sir.
raised.
Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Thank you for today's lecture.
You are welcome.
Yes, sir. So my question is around some of us, we are art students. Sorry. We are trying to divert. Yes. So there are
Okay.
some terminologies that you are using that some of us don't know. So, yes.
All right. We'll note that again. You should have actually mentioned that at the start of the class. Well, okay, nothing special. I will note that against next class. Okay. Do we have any other question? Yeah. Tolulope. How do I pronounce it? But Tolulope.
Yes, I'm speaking now.
Okay, yeah.
Is there any way we can prepare our profit statement through this example?
How?
Is there any way we can prepare our profit statement through this example? Because
No. It's not possible. I did not give you any information concerning price or the other direct costs. I was only focused on the overhead this time. So not possible. Yeah, Felix Oba, you can go on. And your video is on in case you don't know. Felix, you have something to say or you have a question? I think his hand is just there. So I don't see any other hands raised. Felix Oba, do you have a question? You are muted if you are speaking. I cannot hear you. Hello, can you hear me? Because I can see. Okay. Yeah, Rachel Adegoke, you can go on. It's a question.
Are you giving assignments on today's class or to next week?
Nope.
Or
No.
to next class?
No, till next class when we solve our question.
Okay.
I literally just walk us through the basics, then we now see how all those things are matched together in an icon question later. Okay, I don't see any question on YouTube either. So that will bring us to the end of the class. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming. See you next time. The time will be communicated. Might not be following the conventional class timetable because I might be away for some time, so I might need to cover up for those periods that we miss. So, but any class will be communicated at least probably any class that will not be on the timetable will be communicated probably at least a day before the class. So, all right. Good night to everyone.
Okay, good night, sir.
Thank you,
so
sir.
much. Okay,
Thank you, sir. Please don't forget to send the question.
Thank you, sir.
The material to the WhatsApp track.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, sir.
Okay, yeah, I can hear you. I'm through with you.
Thank you,
The
sir.
past questions on activity-based course, can you send it to the group too? The past questions on the year they sent everyone. I mean, the past question on activity-based course, can we see it on the group too? Is it possible, sir?
Yeah, it's possible. But I think KY should have done that, but I will check and send back if I still have it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Good night, sir.
Good night.
Good night, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good night, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good night, everyone.